So I'm at Slavoid T.
All right, this is Shit Spouter 37.
This is Black.com pilled.
This is the Fed Post.
The lumpen PMC thing and basically this idea that M4A and Medicare for All is sort of is a lumpen PMC priority. It's a priority of these downwardly mobile PMC. I think the question I have is especially with this whole door AOC thing is is the problem that what AOC wants is bad, or that she's not committed to it, or just not even AOC, just the left in general? Is the problem that their demands and their ideals are bullshit, which I think of the three of us, I think Slav is more in that camp, or is it that, they're not, they're very, they have a lot of duplicity about what their ideals are, which is sort of where I lean in, and I guess Dor would lean in.
Yeah, so I'll sort of use an anecdote to sort of get to answer that. I think so. For instance, myself, throughout 2019, the concept of healthcare for everyone was sort of, to me, a very, very core element of the Bernie platform. And I thought it was so stark from the outset, just how much that was something that only he was actually committed to. And again,
right.
this is an idealism of sorts, right? The fact that
right.
I genuinely think he does believe it. He's been saying the same thing for 40 years.
Right.
And especially also myself, I live in a country that does have universal healthcare. And I would be, and especially at certain times in my life, but not as much now. I am not as, completely financially in the shitter as I have been at other times. But without that, I would have been so fucked on so many occasions that to me, it's always been gobsmacking, the idea that you could live in a so-called civilized nation and that there are people are dying because they can't they can't see a doctor. That's so wrong to me on a very fundamental level, right? So to me, I thought that was supremely important. And so all year I'm saying Warren doesn't believe in this thing. Bernie's the only one committed to it. And so eventually it took until Warren released her so-called plan for it that other people finally cottoned on. And something I guess I must have pushed to the side during that whole thing was when you actually think about it, let's say Bernie won, what was his move there?
To pressure people in Congress was the move, basically.
What does that mean?
Yeah. I feel I think the function of him winning with that message is just to get it to be something that's hey, this is actually a popular demand. Obviously he would never have any functional ability to actually
mandate was the idea.
Right. And I guess so for me, what eventually sort of all just snowballed into my conception of things. And then I think also I became a lot more sort of brutally realist about this stuff too once the campaign was over. It sort of occurred to me that hang on, if you look back throughout American history, there's always been approval of this meme that Bernie put this on the agenda, we didn't know there was support for it, all that crap. That's not true. You can look back at polling throughout history. You've had movements on and off for universal healthcare for the better part of a century.
Yeah.
There's, of course, the majority of people want to be able to see a doctor. So sort of as an abstraction, yeah, that's true. There's, in the same way as you might say decent wages or whatever. It's sort of ultimately, to me, it comes down to what's ultimately it's actually a totally bourgeois position to be shocked and chagrined that people don't like being totally fucked. Do you know what it's not news that people desperately need healthcare.
People want healthcare.
Of
Obviously,
course,
people
right.
would
This isn't
pre-K.
something. Yeah, it's sort of these people get sort of surprised and they sort of meme their own fucking bourgeois surprise about things, project that out as this universal when it's not a universal. We already knew that. And more importantly, you look at things like the Martin and Gillens from Princeton Boston did this study that came out, I think in like maybe 2014 or maybe 2011. I can't remember, somewhere in that realm, that basically says something like even if 85% of the American public supports a proposition, that will not translate into policy. Whereas if, you know what I mean? Like, again, this is that like super Democrats thing where they believe in the premise of, bourgeois democracy even more than the sort of pragmatic centrists do, insofar as they think all it takes is like an abstract, like sentimental approval of an idea to turn it into a reality, right? And like ultimately that's that. I don't believe that, people's overwhelming sentiment towards something amounts to actual power against the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh no, not at all, though, especially not the way things are structured. And like someone like Bernie coming along offering this idea that it is possible really just like helps to further like build consent for the system. Like people who are already thinking like, oh, we're never going to get fucking healthcare. Oh, well, someone in the mainstream like politics who's on the debate stage is talking about healthcare. So maybe there is hope in the system, when in reality, like there fucking isn't,
Yeah, and that's where I think it becomes the most pernicious, insofar as I think in the present moment, generationally, there's a considerable number of petty bourgeois strivers and even, petty bourgeois strivers in the sort of consultant activistism class who are cognizant of that need for healthcare, especially if they've just like graduated college and like come off mommy and daddy's plan at like 26 or whatever,
right.
And then also like there's a lot of sort of guild work and like doing the work that you have to do to make it in that sort of media activistism industry. That means that like for a few years after college, you'll also not have healthcare as a component of the work you're doing, right? So I think it is real insofar as what happens is that you get the genuine sort of endorsement and passion of this new crop of ultimately liberals, right? Like elite liberals, which is what this is. So there's genuine sort of support for that amongst them. But then what that, I think the perniciousness is the sort of the function it serves in terms of class collaboration, insofar as it brings a lot of people who genuinely desperately need healthcare, but who really ought not be sort of supporting these bourgeois politics. It brings them into the fold. And like, I think the fact, again, much like Bernie being sort of emotionally appealing, like there is, I think, probably some considerable numbers of people within that realm who are genuinely passionate and care about Medicare for all and like wanted that to be a thing, like as an abstraction, sort of amongst that bourgeois activist class, whatever. But I just think if you look sort of with the broader lens of history and you look back at the fact that there have been on and off sort of rumblings of support and activistism around this particular issue for so long and at so many moments throughout American history, the sort of revisionist narrative that this is something that Bernie invented or pioneered or whatever is just a nonsense, right? It's just that there's this sort of new generation who were not privy to or cognizant of the infinite number of times this has been sort of in the
Hillary Clinton brought it up in the 90s.
It's not new for the working class at all. It's always been a need and always been a demand of the working class. The difference is that now the people who are these like downwardly mobile, upwardly aspiring PMC like media type people who are in these NGOs and kind of controlling the narrative from the ground up. Now these people that are the petty bourgeois, they are like, PMC folks are now coming into realization that they are downwardly mobile. And so now this is something that they actually need. It's something that aligns with their personal interests. So now they're going to make that a political project of their own. And just because it happens to be the same demand that is one that the working classes had for all time doesn't mean that now it's just a new thing. It just means that now that this section of the petty bourgeois, of the like aspirational media class, have now accepted it because they are getting closer to precarity and closer to not having any healthcare.
I get that, and I get that the priorities might be different between the people who are in favor from that coalition versus the people in the underclass. I get that, but like, does that mean that I'm supposed to be anti Medicare for all or anti single payer?
Okay, so here's my intervention. What are we talking about when we say Medicare for all or single payer? Like, what do you mean? You mean as a sentiment? Like, it would be nice for everyone to have healthcare? Of course. I still believe that to the core of my very being. I think it's morally repugnant.
You're saying it's impossible in this country.
No, I am not saying it's impossible either. I'm just saying that what it is as a discursive object in partisan politics is not the thing that we wish for it to be.
It's like what we were saying earlier, just about like the popularity of it.
It's a meme.
The popularity of it that's constantly cited as how like achievable it is like really not like telling the whole story. It's a completely different thing unto itself.
The function that it's serving is as a bribe to convince, like a bribe to a bribe that gets basically the working class to like walk headway into the New Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's like a bribe to do.
Yeah, it's a bribe to get working people to do your bidding. And like at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, if you look at the way that his entire staff behaved throughout the primary, and then you look at them sort of making this one post that really pissed me all the way off about a month ago, maybe a couple of months ago. There was this chick who'd worked on his campaign, had been like a Hillary gal prior or an Obama gal prior to that, had like sort of worked in the activism scene for the better part of a decade. She grew up working class, which like all the best Democratic Party operatives grow up working class, just like Amtrak Joe. So this chick, like, you know, she had that like authenticity that as they perceive it. And she basically like, so I don't know if you guys remember, sort of in the middle of the campaign last year, they had this big tantrum about like sort of unionization and pay and benefits within Sanders' campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, yeah, so the upper tier of the operatives got just like this totally red carpet, like pina colada premium royalty benefits package, which is wonderful. And like, I want that for everybody, sure. But the first off, there was like, I've spoken to a lot of people who, there was a lot of exploitation in that campaign, particularly in sort of, you know, the lower level people who don't, you know, get op-eds, they don't turn into influencers or the right. Like, there's a shit ton of exploitation in the other levels. And you sort of saw the way they disposed of someone like Ben, forgetting his last name. I'm blanking on his last name. He did a couple of guest apps on Red Scare. He's now doing a podcast with Ben Mora. So like you saw the way the campaign just like threw Ben Mora overboard, like the moment he was like inconvenient, you know. So like it's sort of so this girl was posting about how, you know, Bernie campaign was still paying her healthcare to the end of 2020. And so what this meant during the pandemic is that like she wasn't forced to take a job that she didn't like. She was actually able to take her time to decide to do something like that would more effectively benefit her career rather than being forced to make a decision in the present. And sort of that, like, sort of what that illustrated to me is that like this Medicare for all within the realm of the class of people seeking it out, like it's not the same thing as the, like, it's not Medicare for all, it's Medicare for me, because these people can't objectively advance the interests of a class that's not that class.
And at the very best, like, it's just like concessions to keep like the current system and status quo going. Like, even if they are able to find out a way to give everyone Medicare for all, that's just going to make a way to like build everyone's consent up that like, oh, look, we finally got fucking Medicare for all, but yet we're all still enslaved in wage slavery, and we're all like still being exploited, like, and everyone's still living in poverty. But like a couple people have healthcare at like a super shitty level. Like it's just another, like, to me, like even something like that's just like more reformism. That's just going to lead us further down into a losing path.
I mean, sure. I think it's, I'm not of the, okay, so what I think is ultimately going to happen is you're going to have a bunch of these like tech oligarchs. They're going to basically create something that sort of like bridges gaps a little more, because like it's not actually useful for people with considerable amounts of money who control everything to have like have the labor force be like sick and unwell, right? So ultimately, in one way or another, they're going to figure out like some sort of gap bridging thing. But I think like the sort of fantasy that was sold as like this idea of wanting to get Medicare for all, that the sort of like petty bourgeois, like young people were attached to, like that wasn't real. It was an idea. And so like, sure, as an abstraction, I totally agree with that. Like to the core of my being, right? But in reality, it was a phrase. Like I was so quick to criticize Warren's alleged plans towards it, but I have no idea what Bernie would have been like. How was Bernie going to achieve it?
Yeah, I was always wondering that myself.
Yeah, it's an illusion, I think, basically, is what I'm sort of saying.
So is that different from the neo-lib Democrats who say like this is an impractical thing? Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. It'll never happen.
I think the left mystifies the stakes a lot more than the shit libs do, and I think ultimately that's the utility of them. Do you get what I mean? Like this sort of like more radical, more holier than thou shit. It's like a mystification of the actual antagonism. Like Hillary's such a contemptible bitch that people don't like her, and when she says like that's never ever ever gonna happen, you're like, fuck you, bitch, you just took so many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from like Goldman Sachs. Like you're such a I'm not going to say the C word, but like, fuck you. Like, you're such a cunt. Like, you're stupid cunt. Fuck you.
You get one per episode, so yeah, you just use it.
It's just so morally contemptible, but then the antagonism is like real and present, right? You're just like, fuck you, bitch. Like,
oh shit, Amy's out.
Aimee. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me personally, I mean, this isn't. I don't think it's. I'm not going to reverse engineer a position where I think that free healthcare is a bad idea, or it's a bourgeois idea, or it's anybody pushing. Oh, there you are. Sorry, we lost you for a bit.
Oh, that's okay. Wait, what did you mean? So like, yeah, you're like, what was I saying when it cut off?
Sorry, I don't remember.
Oh yeah, just the Janet Yellen thing in relation to AOC. Like, so Janet Yellen is starting to get criticized for her like taking millions and millions from investment banks, and AOC, the like fucking little harpy, pops up and turns it into a gender issue immediately. It's like it's the exact same as we're breaking up the big banks and sexism. We're breaking up the big banks and racism. It's the same message, but she's just mystified it further. So she gives like lip service to the idea like, of course, everyone should be held accountable. We should, blah, blah. But then the gender bit pops in. But have you ever noticed how women face a blah? That's all that's the point of the message. That's the takeaway. Because like if it becomes sexist to critique Janet Yellen for taking millions from investment banks, then that's the weapon. That's what becomes politically operative, right? Like the whole like AOC's better at Hillary than Hillary was. She's better at selling it. She's better at selling that hideous politics. She's better at selling it, whereas like
she's a celebrity politician. She's like the new Obama.
Yeah, whereas, exactly. So Obama is a better version of Hillary than Hillary.
Right,
fucking
exactly.
AOC is a better version of Hillary than Hillary. Like, Hillary needed to recognize that she was the fucking faceless woman who put that politics into action. She and Bill, right? Like, that is her politics that AOC is representing. It's like the sort of realization of all this shit that all of the neo-libtards were pushing for decades. And like the neo-libs and the neocons were basically the same thing. Let's just face facts. They really weren't that different. And so like AOC is just like the perfect combination of like the anarchisty, like Naomi Klein anarchists who were ostensibly protesting Clinton in the 90s, and and then just like the combination of it, like, so you get that anarchistic grassroots community bullshit in conjunction with like the brutal fucking let's apologize for Janet Yellen, and then you get this like perfect thing where it's actually like racist or sexist to question the amount of money that these ghouls are getting from banks. Like it's just like the perfect embodiment of it.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Yeah, AOC is full of shit. I mean, that's basically the question I'm asking. Basically, is like is the duplicity the issue or the goal the issue? Because I don't think the goal is the issue, and we've debated this.
That's my question. Whose goal?
Well, anything economic that comes from the left that they supposedly want, I don't have any issue with that. I don't have any issue with those goals. Like, I don't think. Look, I mean, they're making all this insane amount of money, these admin motherfuckers, off people dying and people going bankrupt. I've got no qualms about that being something discussed and something pushed for, whatever. How futile, I don't really care. I mean, I don't buy into the idea that this should just be something that we shouldn't talk about or just like shut up about.
Okay, so yes, so I think the utility, of the Jimmy. Okay, so I don't think Medicare for all is going to happen by any of these people. At least not the Medicare for all that we think we want. And I also think that AOC is exactly the same as Pelosi, that is differentiated by generation and like by aesthetic factors. Right. So if, and what I found so amusing about this whole Jimmy Dore AOC shit is all these motherfucking left apologists think that they can what I see Jimmy's intervention, like what I see is the significance of it, is not that he's trying to it's not that AOC can do something substantive that will get Medicare for all or that will make significant strides towards it. I don't think that's possible. But what I do think is basically going on with any of this shit in the bourgeoisie is it's sort of indicating and messaging to people like the reality of the class contradictions at work here. So to my mind, the fact that you can't even get this bitch to make a token gesture,
Exactly.
You cannot even get even like a symbolic gesture of loyalty from this fucking cunt. Like she won't even put on a show for you. That's how much contempt she has for you. Like she's not even gonna talk the talk, because effectively like bringing any of this to a floor vote is like a talk the talk. She can't achieve it like via any of these votes or anything, which is why when they rain down with all these procedural arguments saying like this is why it wouldn't achieve anything, it's like, well then why wouldn't you just give the plebs like just a symbol to say I haven't forsaken you? Like,
this is a very it's a very nuanced thing. It's like it's a subtle thing. It's like,
and she can't even manage that. She can't even manage to be like, I still care, this matters, I'm here for you, I'm trying to represent your agenda in Washington. Instead, she says, no, actually, fuck you, Jimmy, this is literal violence. Bitch, you're in power.
I mean, that's the subtlety. Is like Jimmy Dore or whoever expecting AOC to actually do anything about this is funny. That's just a joke, right? Especially
get it together.
Yeah, during the campaign, especially she's undermining Bernie and saying like, oh, we're gonna have to compromise on this. Like we all saw that, and Bitchgate and all that. We clearly see that she's not serious about it. So expecting that is a joke. I'm just drawing that distinction from that this shouldn't be talked about at all. That's the thing I'm parsing out.
As far as I'm concerned, in relation to basically anything with discourse, anyone telling you can't talk about something is your class enemy.
Right.
I'm sorry, but that's just not how like the just telling the truth in any given situation is necessarily like the working people don't benefit from any of these mystifications. Like every one of these mystifications is designed to like furnish the illusions to maintain the existing power structure. Like and like this is why I'm so like I feel really confident about the fact of like not lying to people, even if it makes them uncomfortable for a time, even if it makes them uncomfortable for a number of years. It's just like I can't do it. It's not how I see things. I'm not going to lie to you for your own benefit because you're not children. You know, and so that's why I think like this fact that all these people are just like swooping into CAPER and all this shit when like we can all see what's going on.
Yeah, and CRK, I don't think necessarily anyone's saying like that you shouldn't talk about healthcare for all. I think that, or Medicare for all. I think it's like the point is using the utility of like showing that it is something that has always been a demand of the working class, and yet it's never been given any light, never been given any attention until it's become something that affects the bourgeoisie a little bit, or at least this downwardly mobile section of it. And that's why it came into light. It doesn't mean that it's not an issue that should be talked about or fought for. It just means that that's why it came up now, and that it should be understood as being something that has been always materially a driving force for change, and for like working class politics. And then from there to point and say, well, this is what the actual utility is of it for the bourgeois class to make this little bid towards the working class, even if it is also in their interest. They probably realize that there is symbolic power to this, like, oh, we're pushing for Medicare for all. So then it builds consent in the system.
You think Nancy Pelosi is like, you saw the number of articles that Jacobin had to keep running last year saying that Nancy Pelosi is scared of AOC and the squad. You see how much consent manufacture went into like creating that meme? When this bitch walks into fucking office, one of her first votes is voting for Nancy for head of things. She's like taking like all these like ass-kissing photographs with Nats. Nats was in the CPC not very long ago. Like she's always been actually a really progressive liberal. This is why like The Intercept and all these left-right publications are constantly painting Nancy Pelosi as this like Joe Manchin figure. No, Nancy Pelosi and AOC have like 99% the same voting record. Like they are not just like politically in the same party, they're very much in the same faction of the same party. This is the new generation of that faction of that party coming up the ranks in the way that I think since the late 60s, the way that sort of new generations of leftoid figures have risen through those institutions is by weaponizing identity discourses, whether that be racial, gender, any of that bullshit. And you've seen at moments, like even one of AOC's staffers last year. Do you remember the whole thing where they were like saying that the Democrats are like the Southern Dixiecrats, and like maybe Nancy Pelosi just has like a problem with women of color? And like there was that notorious tweet of mine where I was like, why is it that like Nancy Pelosi, Italian American, is like is not a POC, but like AOC Hispanic is like a POC? Like this is so fucking funny when you zoom out for a second, when you realize like it's the same thing. None of this means anything. It's all like there's so much shit going on to like make you think that these people are different or lifting different agendas, when actually what they're doing is the same thing. And I think someone like Jimmy Dore, God love him, I think he still buys a lot of that illusion, which is why he's so passionate about getting AOC to do something to demonstrate otherwise. He also is being a huge bratty sub here because he's begging her to demonstrate fealty. That's what he wants from her. He just wants her to do something, please, because he still has hope in her. And that's what I think is so tragic about all of this, that like the most punitive fucking psycho leftoids who are attacking him is that like actually someone like a Jimmy Dore, like your actual, like your harshest critics who still believe in the mission and believe in you, you should not destroy them. They're your greatest asset.
Best friends.
Jimmy Dore is your greatest asset. And I think that someone like Felix Biederman, who grew up in Hyde Park, has enough, I think, sort of emotional intelligence and sort of, the class upbringing to kind of click to that intuitively, whether it's deliberate or otherwise. And so he sort of made he made a tweet recently, which was something to the effect of like, guys, he was basically sort of cautioning the people who were being horrific towards Jimmy, saying like, he's actually representing like, there's a lot of people who, and he even said so much as to cite metrics. So he said like, Jimmy has a huge fucking audience, like, just like, which is like, and I'm actually not accusing him of being cynical. I think he probably means it. As in like this, he's not entirely unreasonable to sort of have this perspective. And I think those boys can tell that AOC is full of shit, right? They're not asleep at the wheel.
Of course.
Because they're a lot actually more like Jimmy than people realize, insofar as like I think they are basically sort of ultra left, and Jimmy's an ultra left too, which is where again super Democrats like they believe more in it than the sort of centrist pragmatists.
So what do you guys make of this whole thing that the Jacobin left is coming up with of the post left and all these articles that have come up recently that are basically to say the counter argument, right? So if we're saying that they're crypto Democrats, whatever, their counter is we're crypto Republicans.
Apparently,
right?
we're not even crypto. Apparently, according to Carl Baer, our allegiances are quite clear.
Blatantly neocon, GOP. Right.
Yeah. Overtly or de facto Republican.
I have a hard time even talking about that Carl piece to begin with because it was like 3 paragraphs and like it read like a 4th grader. It's just so weird. Like
no, the ending was funny because he was like, the left is the post left is simultaneously not a threat because they're niche, but they're also very a looming danger. If they get the right check, then oh boy, we got a fight on our hands.
Motherfucker's contradicting himself from start to finish.
Basically like, I might be in trouble. My career might be in trouble.
Yeah, what he's saying is like those post-leftists, like they're not well hung. Like their dick is like not even big, but also mine's heaps smaller.
Right.
That's literally all I took from it. Like he's saying, like they're not even a thing. They're not even worth talking about.
But let me write an article about it real quick.
The performative contradictions just giving you away. Like why are you so obsessed with me? It's because you need this stupid specter. It's
funny because
the dude, like, he's had me blocked for over a year. He's like has 50,000 people following him. He's talking about me every day, cutting screenshots of my tweets in half to just like willfully misconstrue everything that I say. It's just like, dude, you're just like you've got problems. You're a fucking hysterical bitch. Like,
well, no, he's in the replies of like dudes that. Yeah, he's in replies of dudes that have like less than 1,000 followers.
The whole time, with me blocked. That's just like grow a dick, you baby.
People that talk to us that are like less than 1,000 followers. He's in their replies. Like he's clearly very like.
Because he won't argue with that. You have to understand all of this is performing a market function. So if he is fighting with people with a large account or a large influence, like what basically he's communicated to me by constantly talking about me but never to me, is that like he's scared of me. That's why he's attacking me. He's scared of me having some form of influence, and he's almost said as much. And it's just like, dude, if you're scared of me when I have 10K followers and can be bopped at any moment, what you're saying is that you're weak.
Yep.
Like you're pulling your own pants down and walking around with them around your ankles. Like if you had any idea, like if you weren't such a pin dick little weakling, you would just pull your pants up and stop bearing your whole ass to the world about just how much of a like weak position you're in right now.
Yeah,
like,
all these articles that came out this year. Yeah, all these articles that came out about the post left.
Not talk about me because you're memeing me into existence. And like ultimately all these people, they need to like meme, and this is what I do actually find quite contemptible. They need to meme a powerless enemy into existence so that when they are attacking people with less power than them, or sort of when they're rallying people to sort of get on board their bullshit, they've created a scapegoat. That's what this is. This is scapegoating, right? And so I serve as this sort of symbolic scapegoat function for all of the failures of the left in much the same way as Angela Nago did. It's just you become the sin eater. And I think the fact that he's so frequently sort of taking quite literally the exact opposite of what I'm saying and alleging that I'm saying, the exact opposite of what I'm saying is just proof positive. The fact that he won't just talk to me. Like, I'd happily have a chat with him. I don't care. It's fine.
Yeah, all these articles of the post left that came out this year from various people, like it just struck me as like it's very fearful. This is the tone I read whenever I skim. I don't really read it, but like when I skim it, it just seems very fearful. It's like, why are you even talking about this.
And they should realize that by talking about it, they talk it into existence. Like that's how you make these things, like, give them power.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So they actually they buy all the premises of the things. So people like Carl Bayer and Brianna Joy Gray were some of the biggest ones to sort of like they self-actualized into that media market by histrionically affixing themselves to these offhanded, like, inappropriate comments that were made about the Bernie people. So, like, nobody needed the Bernie bro myth or, like, Bernie made me white. Nobody needed that more than people like Carl Bayer, Brianna Joy Gray, Leslie Lee. Like, they needed that specter, right? Like, that specter, like, they were able to wield that specter for themselves to meme themselves back into the discourse constantly, right? So I think somehow he seems to think that, like, but like, that has no utility to me. I actually have substantive beliefs. I've been making my own critiques the whole time. I don't need to, like, be a parasite in the way that these people do. I don't need to attach myself to Carl Bayer and his bullshit to have people interested in what I have to say, and I'm not going to do that, right? Like, and it's so tempting sometimes to start, like, digging through all the garbage he's saying and refute it point by point, but, like, I think ultimately that's sort of what they want, right? Like, that's what he wants. Like, or whether he wants it or not, like, I don't see any utility to it. I think he's a child. I think he's not very clever. I think he's not very interesting.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, I would be more than... I'd be happy to engage with him anytime. And, like, the sheer fact that he's just obsessing hysterically like a little bitch about me is stupid. And also, like, I've never had any affinity with this post-left thing. The post-leftists were anarchists in the 90s. Like, it's not a thing I've ever aligned myself with. I reject it. The one other thing I will say, though, is organically, when all those left freaks were attacking me, a bunch of the sort of so-called reactionary right-wing people sort of came to discover what I had to say and sort of started following me and stuff. And I've sort of always been of the firm beliefs that so much of this stuff is just like meme bullshit, like these meme identities that people adopt for themselves to sort of survive or thrive in the online space. Like, it's sort of branding of a kind. And so to my mind, like, I'm not gonna I don't need to do that as such. I don't need to say, like, oh, anyone on the right is like a contemptible piece of shit. Don't follow me. Get away from me. I don't need to denigrate them to articulate my views on things. You know what I mean? I'm not dependent, again, on that specter of, like, the MAGA chud piece of shit who just fucking hates brown people. Like, that's just not true. Like, yeah, there's shitty and good people in every group of people. So let's just all grow up. So I sort of had no problem talking to these people, and they began to follow me. And then I've also made it very clear the whole time, however, that I will have no anti-racism. I mean, so I'll have no racism, no anti-Semitism in my mentions. I'm never going there. Like, that's never going to change. Sorry, boys. Like, don't bring that around these parts. But I'm also not going to construct these just bullshit boundaries in the discourse if we don't talk to those people, because I think that's very much something that the bourgeois needs, and I don't need that.
Yep.
I don't need there to be this polarization. That doesn't benefit me in any way, shape, or form, to have people wanting to rip each other apart based on fear and paranoia. I think that's actually really toxic, because if the bourgeois are like this petty bourgeois in revolt that want to rip each other's heads off, like, guess who those people have power over working people, and they're the ones who always cop it from this, you know? So to me, like, just the bourgeois being psycho is not good for it. There's no advantage. Like, basically, when this is a bigger example, but, like, when the bourgeois go to war against each other, like, working people die.
Yep.
That's how this works. So to me, like, just this performative incivility of just hating people because they're ostensibly different, I'm not going to do that. I'm happy to talk to anyone. If any of the leftoids wanted to have me on their programs, and they did for a time, I went on their programs. And if people on the right are going to chat with me or print my words unadulterated, that's fine too. And I think ultimately, if you recognize that the working class's interests are not invested in the left or right of the bourgeoisie,
Exactly, yep.
then the idea of demanding that someone who's producing like intellectual labor be ideologically aligned with the person paying them for it. That's sicko shit.
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
the most tyrannical thing I've ever heard. That's telling you to like love your boss.
Yeah.
That's sicko shit.
And if someone says something that's right and it's like a good critique, it doesn't matter who the fuck said it. Like, it's right. It rings true. And like, there's utility to it. And like, I don't know. They also, when you start to actually look at it, like you were saying, the working class's interests are not, divided upon left and the right ideological lines as strongly as they are divided along class lines of material interests and fighting for material gains. So when you start talking to people, especially if they're going to be of the working class or of your same class, you're going to find that regardless of whatever fucking identity, like political identity that they subscribe to, or they like tell people they subscribe to, you're going to find you have a lot more fucking common ground than you do not. Because like once you get through that ideology and through all these layers of bullshit, you're going to find that your main issues are going to be stemming from the same fucking material causes. And once you can find that, draw that line, you can say, hey, well, actually, we have a lot more in common than we would have thought if I would have looked at you as a rightoid and you looked at me as a leftoid, when actually we're just fucking people, man.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing.
People, hey.
Yeah, it definitely
like,
strikes me as like a fearful thing. I mean, it strikes me as what Aimee always says, like these people are just concerned about their careers in the media space. And like, yeah, I mean, them talking about the post left and like very small accounts and like very marginal people that, aren't that much of an influence. Like it really, it just strikes me as fear. It strikes me as, and, even some of them who we know have talked about like, hey, well, as much as we hate the post left or whatever, like it's funny, like they're the only ones who've done any reflection about the left's failures, right? One of them said that. So
my thing is like, having been around these people for long enough, I see all of this within a cyclical, not cyclical as in like reactionary, like time is cyclical. No, like as in like, not as in like history is cyclical, but just in terms of like there are very real political and market functions of these behaviors.
No, I know it's cynical. No, I know it's cynical.
No, I don't think it's cynical. I think I think a lot of these people actually believe the bullshit that they're huffing, but I just think like it's also very clear to me that that there is a faction of the right wing who they benefit from, like that there are a couple of things about which Carl is not wrong. So it's totally plausible, and there's also like a historical precedent for this, that sort of disillusioned leftists moving over to the right have some form of sort of credibility on certain questions that perhaps like conventional right wingers might not have credibility on. They'll have certain experience with sort of tactically, strategically understanding the way the left works and the sort of like, helping people break down and understand that. So I'm very cognizant of that. I was also like, it's something I've actively worked to not lapse into. So I won't name names, but on more than one occasion, I was asked to write a sort of leftist case for Trump for different publications. I was asked to whether I would endorse Trump for like by a couple of different people. So like I'm not. I think it's a mistake to deny this sort of grain of truth in what Carl is trying to turn into a big scary. So I can appreciate the sort of like what he's trying to do, but if it starts to seem like, or if in fact it becomes evident that I'm working with or actively advancing some kind of Republican agenda as such, I would very much hope that you would sort of hold my feet to the fire, for lack of a better expression. I think that, if my views massively change, or if I just sort of like slowly walk backwards into being some kind of generic normie-con, okay, then judge me accordingly. Absolutely. But I think in the interim, sort of trying to create... Like the thing that's so funny to me is like the only things that Carl actually knows are things that I've openly said aloud, right? Like he's not actually doing anything. He's not discovering anything. Like, dude, you're not doing anything.
Well, that's the other thing.
Anything I haven't already told them.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to ask, as far as like the criticism of GOP Marxists, right? That whole line.
That's not a thing.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is like, we had the good old boys on, and like, they don't claim to be Marxist, obviously, but like basically we've had conversations with SLAV and like Merrick of like, you know, whether the GOP is an avenue for anything for the underclass or the working class, etc. So I guess that's a question for you, because I mean, I definitely, you know, I supported Trump, but I don't like anybody in the GOP. I supported Trump because the GOP seems to dislike him. That's why I supported him. And I definitely, you know, just to be clear for everybody listening, like I asked Aimee like to endorse Trump. Like I definitely did ask that because I was like, I think it would mean something. And I mean, you know, it probably doesn't mean anything in general.
Actually, I wasn't even referring to you when I just said that just now. I was, Sorry, I wasn't like subtweeting. I wasn't trying to be sly bitch. No.
But I mean, just to be clear, like I did ask you to do that because I was like, I mean, it probably doesn't make a difference in general, but like I asked you and like a couple others because I was just like, you know, I think he is clearly better, and I think the GOP doesn't want him, and that was proven by their actions. And I thought that the neo-Libcon establishment doesn't want him, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, I could see why Carl would say something like this, and I would fall under that that umbrella term.
Well, yeah, you were definitely making that case. That's not a secret. And this is why I just think like mystifying all this bullshit is such a waste of time. Like you were very direct about it. You were like, I don't think either of these motherfuckers is going to do anything monumental for working people. But I do think it's fairly, you know, self-evident in this case that like fucking Joe Biden isn't. And if you're going to pick one of them, roll with Trump. Like
the lesser of evils, right? On war and trade. Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's pretty much my argument. I couldn't quite get there, but what I did think was valuable and what I kept memeing into the discourse was I think what's telling is the fact that I so ruthlessly just kept saying Joe Biden's a piece of shit. Here's Joe Biden's record. Here's how absolutely and utterly contemptible a piece of human feces he is. Like, that was so frequently digested by all these motherfuckers as like, she was telling people to vote for Trump. That sort of tells me like just how much of a sort of position of submission they're in to the Democratic Party. That like somebody critiquing that guy in that moment amounts to supporting the other guy. It tells you that's
to
why
tell
all the
that's
why all the major left podcasts they stopped critiquing Biden because that's what that implicated. But do you feel any avenue in the GOP, like any practical avenue, you know, it could be on an individual level, like less for any like benefit to the working class. I mean, forget Trump. I mean, forget the GOP in general. Like, do you feel like there's individual actors like Howley or like anybody that's particularly like an avenue to that, or do you like how do you parse that out? Do you think it's all for useless, or?
I think it's very tempting for bourgeois especially to displace basically like the interests of the working class as a class, to sort of conflate that with, you know, individual and itemized things that may or may not benefit individual members of said class, right? So I don't think as a class working people have any interest in either of these motherfucking parties, and they should just protect their neck.
Yeah, exactly.
I think on occasion, like let's say hypothetically that the holy Sanders thing, they managed to, you know, get the government to send out a $2,000 check to everyone. Like in a very immediate sense, getting $2,000 around Christmas or New Year's, that's totally beneficial. Like you'd be fucking retarded to be like, I'm not accepting this. They're bad people. No, of course. We're not like bougie retards who reject money on the basis of like fucking principle. Not bitch. If I'm hungry, I'm taking your money. Okay, that's fine. I don't care. It's all blood money to me, because it's all exploited out of me. I don't get to have that luxury of like, oh no, I'd only prefer the free trade exploitation. So sure, yeah, you can enjoy the like you can very much like want to get that check. Like give me my Trump bucks, give me my Sanders holy fash bucks. I don't give a shit. Like that's fine. But like, am I under any illusions about sort of who Hawley is or what his project is? Of course not. He's like, he went to the same Ivy League institutions as every other motherfucker on the left. It's just that at this particular conjuncture in history, there's going to be an opening for this sort of like working class sort of meme candidate on the right, which for the past like 20, 30, 40 years has been less the case just because of the sort of the extent to which the Reagan era sort of turned them all into like fucking free marketeers, right? So yeah, sure, of course you'll get a candidate who's sort of like doing that similar thing on the other side. But like, if you think about it, Biden's really not that different to that either. This Amtrak Joe bullshit, lunch pail Joe, like he's been that sort of figure for most of his career. Joe from Scranton, totally. So it's like, it's the same thing. And like, it's funny to me, I think the sort of, just on a personal note, I think that the sort of the very classed way we sort of interpret and understand these things, I think sort of can't be overstated. So like the reason that all these motherfuckers are shook about Hawley is because like they too are of the same sort of pedigree, and they're so dumb as to think that like that most work, or like they sort of want to meme into existence the idea that like most working people are like that they see Hawley as one of them, which is why these fucking retards are constantly trying to like remind you that people like Tucker and Hawley and Trump are wealthy. It's like, bitch, we all know this. The only person, like, you're just trying to convince yourself. Like, you're trying to convince yourself. Nobody, like, no working person is fucking confused about this shit. And I thought it was also very funny insofar as like, because I grew up in sort of like the similar sort of pretentious elite environments as someone like a Hawley, probably not to the same extent, but like to the extent that something like Sydney University or the private high school I went to was like filled with the type of kids who, you know, go to Ivies in America. It's like the equivalent. And so like to me, like I find all these like fuck you bullshit to these creeps. Like I find that appealing. And then also like as a woman having a like younger guy who's doing all this, like he's very much like an AOC figure for the GOP. Like every now and then, like I hate to admit it, but this is very much class conditioned. Is like, but every now and then I'm like, fuck, that's hard. I'm like, you know what I mean? So I very much do think this stuff can sort of have the like alternative impact on either different side, whatever. Like it sort of has impacts that I found it so perfect that like my actual politics is like the moment I saw what's going on, I'm like, yeah, he's just being a smart politician. Like there's just an opening in the present moment, given the state of things for a lot of he's from not Minnesota,
Missouri.
the other one. Missouri, yeah. So there's very much an opening, like given the state of things in Missouri, for a sort of like workers conservative figure to pop up on the national stage and sort of play that role. And like he's savvy enough to have identified that, and that's what he's leaning into. Like, good on him. Whatever, I don't care. Like, but I'm not under any illusions about what it is. But I can still at the same time be like, fuck yeah, that's hot. Every now and then I'm like, Aimee, get over it. Like I don't. But I'm still not. But I'm not like confused about it. You know what I mean? It's just that there's a part of me where that's culturally conditioned, and like sort of a similar cultural conditioning was like I was starting to beef, and his like every one of his heckles goes up about this motherfucker. He's just like, nah, I don't trust him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's just, and it was so I just find that shit all so funny. Like, and so when all these like leftoids are all like, oh, what you think Hawley's gonna be a working class hero? I'm like, no.
Like, of course not.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, they asked me the same thing about Trump. Like, you think he's going to be like a working class, like a Marxist, like Leninist hero? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Together, you idiots.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like in the same way that I think, say, someone like, so you know, like Darren Beatty, who we had on our show, or even Curtis Yarvin as well. As these, like, I don't think any of them have any real. I think Darren Beatty's really smart, and I think the GOP would do well to listen to him in terms of turning away from all the neocon fuckery that they've been neck deep in for decades. But in terms of anything like amounting to any Marxist bullshit. But that's not in the agenda here. That's not what we're talking about here, right? We're just talking about bourgeois electoral politics. So like the Sisyphean boulder that they're pushing up the hill is that of their own class, which is a historical dead end. Like that they can't. Like that's. I'm sorry, I do buy the whole like capitalism is too contradictory to last. Like how long it lasts, I don't fucking know. But like the bourgeoisie, I don't think is like it's not in a revolutionary phase anymore. You're not going to have a civil war. Like the equivalent of a civil war amount of like people just sort of dying and disappearing out of the realm of people you need to give a shit about is like that's happening through neglect. You know, they don't need to send Union soldiers to like take over territory to do that anymore. They just send fucking Purdue Pharmaceuticals in there. You know, so like all this like fearful paranoia on both sides. I think the millenarianism of like the Trotskyites on the far left who are like, you know, fash fear mongering every 5 minutes. That's just facile. Because what it ultimately absorbs is the premises of democracy. Again, they fully believe in like the democratic system as actually being one of like where we make the decisions. No, we don't. The democracy is just to ask for the dictatorship of capital. So the moment that you sort of like reject the premise of that, it all becomes, I think, pretty crystal clear. And so I think also like it's very funny to me just how much people like Steve Bannon and shit like actually believe in democracy. Like it's so cute. I find it quite endearing. Like the fact that he's on Red Scare saying like, yeah, we want an ABC. Like we want someone who's gonna like go out and be able to successfully seek the consent to govern, to get people to vote for them. Like that's what he wants. He's just a boring like right winger. Like it's just there's nothing even like scary about any of it. But it's nothing's gonna dramatically sort of change. None of these people are trying to do anything revolutionary. They're just trying to keep the bougie ship afloat, you know?
Right. I see what you mean. Like you're recontextualizing to electoral bourgeoisie politics, which COH talks about a lot.
Yeah. Totally.
Like I think I think there's a temptation within like a bunch of like sort of ultra left discourses to then sort of, and I think this is actually like a total cope and like a misdirection, is where they suddenly say like this isn't actually workers' politics. Why are you even talking about it? It's not mass politics. Stop playing culture wars. Why are you even talking about all this shit? It's like, well, bitch, I don't know if you noticed, but these are the people in charge. So it sort of says to me that like it's such a totalizing luxury to be like, who cares what the people in charge are doing? I don't know, bitch. If you're under the domination of these motherfuckers, it kind of matters to see what they're up to. Does it not? Like it says to me, like if you have the luxury of sort of pretending none of this matters, then you're in a position of comfort. I think.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I think there's also a point like where people get to a place of like dejected hopelessness too. Like where I know like most underclass people that I know, like my family and people I've been raised around, like they don't vote or anything like that because
that's the only rational response. Yeah, but that's good. Like we don't want to like this sort of bourgeois response to that then is to try to like increase their participation, to try to like get them back in to react to it. No.
Yeah, you want to keep them out.
No, I don't want that.
Get more people out of it.
In fact, if anything, like I don't like that's. I mean, if you sort of took seriously all this stuff that I'm saying, like this is why I find it so funny that Carl wants me to be a Republican because then the whole thing makes sense. But actually, what I'm saying is that this is all shite. It's all
absolutely.
You shouldn't do any of that, and that's an existential threat to someone, to a leftist, because you're saying like all of what you're doing is just bullshit. And it's not bullshit because they believe in what the other side's doing. It's bullshit because you're full of shit.
Yeah, it's bullshit because it's built to be bullshit. Like it's built to be the mask for capital, extracting its a capital and like just kind of putting forth its will. And it's like the most amicable and most digestible face for capital. So like representative democracy is like gonna be what they need it.
It's far more effective to have this like stakeholder capitalism than that starts like telling you it cares about you and it wants to hear all the voices and spaces and bodies and representation and your voice matters and join the conversation. Like actually like increasing inclusivity at a symbolic level is really a really effective way to mystify the absence of power. Like to give if you could pay for trinkets and emotional satisfaction, if you give them serotonin as opposed to dollars, it's still something that can sort of like you can pay people in a clout of a kind, which is why someone like Carl does all of the discourse janitorial work that he does.
Yeah, like, social capital.
Clout. He's being paid in clout, nothing more. Literally, like he does it for free.
I think there's a lot to be said for that.
But if he's being paid only in clout, right? If he's putting in all this effort to just like build up this like clout within this one particular realm, and some absolute little bitch from Australia comes along and says, these people have no clout, they have no credibility, they're fucking losers and frauds. That to him is like, wait, what? Because all I get paid in is the clout of these people. And this bitch is just like burning my whole bond down.
Right. No, that's what I noticed because I would attack targets higher than them, obviously, like Bernie or AOC or the left in general. I'd be focused on them, like some people with actual power. And then these people would come out of the woodworks and just getting mad at me. And I'd be like, I've never heard of you. I don't know who you are.
Yeah, but they need them too. Like they're attached to them. That's daddy.
Exactly. Yeah,
without
exactly.
Daddy, I don't exist.
That's what I found so surprising. Yeah. I was like, why are you? I'm talking about them. Like, what do you have to do with this? Like, why are you so mad? I'm criticizing them. Yeah, and exactly. That's what I started to realize was like, oh shit, like there's this whole
it's like a mutual narcissism. It's group narcissism of like the liberal elite.
Yeah, there's this like this whole ring. Yeah, there's like a tier of people to activate to defend and provide insulation for this higher tier and so on and so on.
Yeah. And it's all sort of like we say it happens organically. It's not like anyone sits around and like divvies out all these different roles and tasks.
No, you're right. Exactly.
They have the platforms and the institutions through which they operate, and then it sort of just develops that way.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It's organic. It's organic clout. Yeah.
The function that Carl also serves ultimately for the media establishment is that because he, like, if they have given him clout, so he's invested with like a media clout from that set. So then when he runs something in his stupid blog, it has a degree of authority far more than anyone just like writing something stupid on a blog, right? So, but then because he's connected to all those losers and there's a mutual investment in the like clout thing that they each have for each other, then the media can pick up one of his totally like speculative, totally full of shit pieces and then write about that, citing him, and then we're off to the races. Because once it starts becoming this self-referential internal within the media discourse, then that's all it needs to be. So basically people like Carl act as like the initial kindling that makes it sayable for that actually people at media establishments that otherwise couldn't just bring this totally fake bullshit into the story.
Exactly.
They kind of poke around the fringe and like try out like new bullshit takes and see what hits and what doesn't.
Right. They're the young hitters that you send out to do the dirty work that you can't do yourself, and then you retweet it. Yeah.
And so they're just as mutually invested in that. This is what I ultimately found quite repugnant amongst the leftists is the extent to which succeeding within that sort of like bullshit milieu is contingent on just looking the other way when people do things that are really, really contemptible. So like in retrospect, it's pretty bizarre that like for throughout most of the primary, like you could most of these like New York media people are like regularly writing viral tweets about just this random bitch, me. Like, why are you even talking about me, you weirdos? Like, why are so many of you talking about someone with no power, no authority? And they like eventually like they can allow like so by making me a villain, it's sort of the same thing as making Carl like a good guy. Do you get what I mean? It's just this like necessary illusion into which they all buy. So like you can't become this sort of Carl figure or any of the other figures if you actually say to one another, like why were all these media people, why wouldn't some of them just say to each other like, why are you still talking about her? It's kind of creepy and weird.
Yeah, Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So, but they're mutually invested in this whole bullshit specter creation. So they can't like delegitimize Carl or be like, Carl, why are you still talking about that bitch? This is obsessive and creepy. This is why the only way they can ever object to him is like, Carl, I really love your work. I've really enjoyed your work. Or Carl, I think you're a great journalist, but that's because they're all invested in the same project, and that it requires maintaining Carl as the useful guy who can feed the inappropriate stuff into the discourse without having to go through a fact-checking department or a legal team.
I never read Jacobin. I never read that shit. The people I know in real life who read Jacobin were like the most bougie, mayo motherfuckers, pale motherfuckers that read that shit. So like I never took it serious. I don't know these people. I don't know who they are. And these shit posters that are like part of the dirtbag, I've never found their shit funny. No. I don't know who they are. But when I talked about these other people, these people with actual influence in the world around us, they came out of the woodworks against me.
Yeah.
Most of the case. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know who you are. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't talk about you. I didn't talk about you because I don't know who you are. But, you know, they got activated, and it's the hive mind that you're talking about, basically.
Yeah, you sort of see the way these things become like an immune system response almost.
Exactly.
You know, like and that's the other thing that's so funny. You watch the little butt lickers, like the bottom feeder accounts that just like are so there for it. They say things like as a way to like somehow own me is like, bitch, you didn't come up with the critique of Warren. Everyone knew that. Like, also nobody didn't like you because of Warren. They just hated you because you're such a bitch. They hated you because you're so shit. Like, they just hate you because they hate you because you're a bad person. I'm like, okay, like,
I've seen them say your name and like censor it and like have an asterisk in it. Like, once I saw that, I was like, all right, this is some childlike infantile shit. Like that was hard to believe.
It's just all mimesis. It's all just like a mimetic shit that's going on. It's got nothing to do with me. Like, it's just fulfilling a symbolic function. And like, if in fact it was that one thing I do find contemptible, I suppose, is just the assumption that everybody is as much of a cynical market subject as you are, such that like when they're abusing someone, not only do they abuse them, but then they insist that they wanted it and they were asking for it. So like so much of this, I read Gad starts saying like, you know, there's most like actually violent bullshit. And then all these people at the same time, like, see, it's good for her. She wants it. She's asking for it. Like, this makes people like know who she is. All this shit. I'm like, I didn't ask for any of this. Angela certainly didn't ask for any of this. You people are fucking psycho. Like, this is abusive. This is crazy talk. Like, so.
Well, these people also, they posit themselves as a victim in every scenario, and they want to be. So then they immediately would assume that someone else would want that as well.
Yeah, it's that narcissism again. And I think...
or that you're like the arm of fascism, basically holding them down and oppressing them. You're one of those arms or one of those extremities. Sure. That's basically how they imagine it, which is, deranged. I mean,
it's funny. And I think one of the funny things is like, because and especially in real life, I'm so puny and a chick. Like this idea of being this like big, this intimidating spectre was always just so silly to me. And one thing I do find is that like if people listen to the show, they're like, oh, your voice, like, oh, you sound so little. And I think it's interesting the extent to which if you sort of like alienate people from themselves, right? If the Aimee you're getting is this like bite-sized version in sort of like chunks of text that I type onto a platform, it's much easier to sort of differentiate that from Aimee the person. And to sort of feel, a great deal of hostility towards these words and then attribute that to me. Whereas sort of if you hear me say them, you might be like, what's this bitch talking about? But like you probably won't get the same degree of like animus and like virulent hatred, they sort of like, and I think it's funny. I sort of thought for a long time, maybe like people who like me, they tend to think my voice is funny or cute or whatever. And then people who don't like me, they find it very, very annoying. And I get why, but I think increasingly also I've realized like part of the reason why the leftoids find it even more annoying is because it has a vulnerability to it that perhaps like my bombastic tweets don't. And I think what that sort of reminds them of is the fact that like they're actually being sort of gross.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
totally.
That you're a person, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like
that's even more annoying. It's like this bitch with her like little bitchy girl voice is like suddenly I start to feel like I've been just like abusing like actually a woman for a long time. Like
you're not the big bad wolf like shadow that's showing up. You're actually just like the person making the shadow. Like
also like vulnerability that isn't just like performative, like on this little like agreed upon short list of things that we're kind of highly valuing right now. Like I like genuine vulnerability,
like the polyamorous.
Yeah. Oh man, don't even get me fucking started right now.
Oh god,
let's go.
No, but anyway, you just got me wound up with the poly thing.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Like I don't want to sort of posit that somehow like the mere fact of me having meant well and taken a few hits for it somehow exempts me from being within a marketplace. It doesn't, right? So I've been taking money from the podcast since I think March last year, right? That was the first time I took a payment. And then how it worked for the first year or so when we were doing the Burning campaign is like our whole Patreon just went to paying our producer. So he was a friend of mine who I looked into production at the very outset when we started the podcast. I was like, holy shit, it's quite expensive. He's like, I'll do it for free. Like, I'll do it, but you don't have to pay me. I'm like, no, I don't feel comfortable with like not paying you. But if you're prepared to do it sort of without payment, at least initially, while we sort of like build up a bit of the following, then we'll give the first like, $1,000 to you and then sort of take it from there, whatever. So that's what we did for the first year or so. And so I sort of felt like in some extent, like I was sort of, I didn't feel quite as like much of a market actor in a certain sense, but like I guess I am now, right? So you should be cognizant of that, and I'm not trying to pretend that like that any of my critiques, should they apply to me, then apply them to me. But I just think this whole meme of like they're doing like Claremont alt-right shit is silly, and like I became friends with people on the right because they were considerate and also just like engaged with me intellectually.
And so, Marianne Williamson said that same thing. It's like, these people on the left, they're fucking dickheads. Like even she said that on the hot mic compared to the right.
Yeah. Like it's really not even like complicated at all. And like, but I'm also cognizant as well, like that, I think part of it is that because the right are under no illusions about doing like some workers thing, right? They don't need the strength of weakness. They don't pretend to be doing workerism. They're just like trying to be like effective management, right? So like I'm not like me say if I went on to like say like for instance we had Oren Cass on the program, and like I think he really means what he's saying. I think he's really genuine, but I think ultimately like what people don't realize is that unionism has always been, at least since the New Deal, like unions have been fully lock, stock and barrel like component of bourgeois management.
Yep.
Like they make labor safe for capital. That's their function. That's why they got incorporated into the bourgeois state in the New Deal. Like that's what that is and does. And so it seems to me like basically Oren Cass is saying like this administrative arm, which is what the unions are, is not particularly effective at the present, which is absolutely true. What if we did it differently? And so like I don't care. It's not a threat to labor insofar as labor is not unions don't represent the interests of labor.
Yeah.
They're an administrative arm of the bourgeoisie. And so this whole like battle between, the left and right over unions is just arms of management competing with one another. And so that's why I can sit and listen to Aaron Cass and not be like, oh, this is a threat to like labor workers.
Right.
It's because the left is so constantly like pretended that what they're doing is worker shit. And so the flip side of this ultimately is that like, because the right understand, because power to them is actual power, not just like some chick saying something or some person disagreeing with you, they're not threatened by me, right? Like, why would Aaron Cass give any fucks whatsoever if I sort of said aloud, like he's saying aloud that this is obviously like he said openly in the interview, all this stuff that like a leftist would never say, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to me that I got like bundled into the whole post-left thing, because to me it was very organic. It was just like, you guys ate a bunch of shit. The left ate massive shit, so much shit that they had no choice but to become part of the DNC because there was no other avenue.
But it was always already, That's
but I mean, it was so dramatic that like I was just basically like, oh well, why don't we rethink what was going on? And that question alone triggers the fuck out of everybody. And like the cult that it is, and the parasocial club that it is, they reject the fuck out of that. And I mean, this is the thing, is like, even you and me, like when I've like had disagreements with you or debates with you even a year ago about like systemic racism, and I was saying, oh, it's a real thing, but it's a segment with this, and you said, oh, you don't agree to whatever. We still disagree about things about lumping proles and all that, like, but you've never freaked out and had that immune response of like, oh well, you're a bad person. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not afraid of disagreement because, again, I don't have any power, so it's not a threat to me.
Plus, disagreement's fucking fun. Like, if you're actually like someone who's not worried about being exposed for your bullshit, if you're actually someone who has like strong foundational beliefs, it's fun to be able to like poke around with ideology and see what other people believe and like where it matches up and where you have shortcomings, and like it's fun and it's helpful and constructive.
Yeah, bro, that's why I got bored of all these other podcasts, because all these dudes like agree with each other, and you, me, and Slav, like we disagree all the time. Like, it's more fun. Honestly, that shit is more fun to me. Like, that
here, like Slav is a mark ass bitch, and we all know
he's a mark ass neocon bitch.
I like that. Like, one of the things our calling cards somehow on Twitter is just like, we're the guys that disagree all the time.
People are like, I don't understand their project. Like, what do they even want? It's like nothing. We're just talking. We all disagree.
No, because what it is like you're not pushing a unified agenda, and because that's ultimately the function of most of these little media projects, is actually pushing a particular party line, whether they massage it and sort of disguise it and give it a new, like, more radical than thou rebrand. It's all still actually singing from the same hymn book. And so if you have people who are not singing from their hymn book, they're like, okay, what's their fucking angle? Whose hymn book must they be singing from? Oh, it must be Chris Buskirk's hymn book. It must be some big like tech oligarch. It must be Bronze Age pervert. It must be all this shit. I'm like, no, actually what's happening is you're all like crybaby women, and like, as a woman, I don't like being surrounded by other bitches who act like bitches. It's unpleasant. I find a lot of guys on the other side far more charming and far more interesting to talk to. It's very straightforward. And if you stop behaving like little pindick babies, we wouldn't have this problem. So, like, to me, a prime example of this is, say, I don't know if you guys know, like, just sorry to be on Twitter for a moment, but like, Alalika on Twitter. Yeah, so he gets shit from some of like the most normcore like leftoids for like having always had like a soft spot for me and always like defended me and shit when they're getting too crazy. And he and I have always got along like a house on fire, even when we'll fully disagree about shit. But like, he's charming. He's a big boy. Like, he knows what he believes. He's not afraid of me. He recognizes that I'm nothing to be scared of. He also like has an actual job, is an actual lawyer, and so like he can just be having fun on the internet, you know. Right. And so like he's not trying to like protect his neck, and I'm not threatening anything he's up to, so he can sort of see with relatively clear eyes that like this bitch isn't like pushing some like secret agenda. Sure, I disagree with her about a bunch of things, but she seems pretty fucking harmless. Like,
yeah, that's the difference. Yeah, Carl seems panicked. Like him and people like him seem motherfucking panicked. Like, yo, relax, bro, relax.
Yeah, they're like roaches when you turn the light on.
You psycho. Yeah, like just settle down, bitch. And that's why I found it like the one thing that gets like some of the garbage I'm so mad is like I sort of got to thinking one day, I'm like, this dude has like a wife and child, so he's sitting there at home with the kid, like sniping at. This was actually I won't implicate anyone, but a friend of mine sort of suggested
play with your child.
Yeah. Like, okay, so a friend of mine sort of suggested, like, I just assume all these people are gay, he said to me. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, but well, what dude is like sniping at women on the internet all day? Like, you have to be gay to do that. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you don't do that to a chick. Like, what do you do? That's just weird. Like, that's weird behavior. I'm like,
no, he's just a sicko freak.
I'm like, no, I know, but that's what I said. I was like, no, he has like a wife and child. And then this friend of mine was like, oh, that's fucking weird, man. Like, that's weird. And then I sort of thought about it. I'm like, wait, so like what? He's like their baby in the other room, and like, or what? Like his wife gets home from work that day, and then she's like, oh, honey, how was your day? Like, what did you get up to? And he's like, I fucking owned that bitch, Aimee, Terese. like, dude, just be a dad. Like, be an adult.
Well, to be fair, some women have it coming. To be honest, I have to be real. Some women have it coming, but to be honest, like I think to me,
of course, like go for it. But that's the thing. Like these boys on the right, like men on the right, like they know how to put me in my place in a way that's hot. That's not like being a dumber. But do you know what I mean? Like
he goes after people that I've seen with like 600 followers, and just like he's going after them. Like if I have a kid, if I have a family, and I'm like quote tweeting and like shitting on someone with like 600 followers, like it's over for me. It's over. Like I don't know what's wrong. Something went wrong, and my life is in shambles. Like I shouldn't be that online that I'm doing that. Like something went wrong. Like hopefully someone would check me at that point. Hope someone that I'm with would check me, because I don't know.
Where is his wife?
It's such a weird like intuition to have. Like to me, there's sort of been one or two times where I've disagreed. Like I guess also as a girl, like I sort of forget sometimes that like to one extent or another, like if I'm sort of disagreeing with someone, like especially if they're much smaller than me, I don't want to sort of like make them feel bad or whatever. I'm not used to sort of thinking of what I have to say as having any sort of like influence or like making someone look small or whatever. So sometimes I'll sort of disagree with the accounts who are much smaller than me, and then someone will be like, oh, why were you like owning so earlier? I'm like, wait, what? I thought we were just having like a dessert. So I had to become sort of like very, I guess what I'm trying to say is I was so sort of cognizant of not like trying not to sort of do that, and also really enjoying being able to like when I do have an account that picks up a bit of steam, to be able to like help like this is what I mean. I actually am a fucking libtard in many senses, like to be able to help like the sort of littler accounts, like to be able to give them a bit of a hand up, like that's dope. I like that, like being able to like, you know, give a bit of promo to small accounts that don't have much attention or whatever. That's nice. And then I'm like, oh, you're such a libcock.
No.
You know what I mean? But like it's just, I don't know, it's all kind of stupid, but I guess it's like I'm under no illusions about the fact that like my politics and yours are probably significantly different, and as you guys have said, you're all not the same anyway. And then like certainly like I love Marek and Beef and stuff, but our politics are wildly different. Wildly. And I'm under no illusions about that. I'm just not like some scared baby who like only like, but that's the thing. Like, what am I only gonna like? These people are like my actual friends. What am I only gonna like people who profess fealty to the church of like leftism?
Yeah, that's what they'd have you do.
Right. It's the cult,
shit.
Yeah, cut off grandma, cut off your friends.
Yeah, no, I no, sorry.
That's a movie Bob type shit.
Yeah, loyalty matters. This is where the boys on the right are absolutely right. Like, this is where the reactionaries are right. And sure, they can achieve the type of world where those sort of like Aristotelian virtues or sort of like more like kind of patriarchal ties of a sort are going to be reinvigorated, right? Like, I'm a Marxist. I understand that like the bourgeoisie has like torn that asunder, right? Like, I'm not confused about it, but in an interpersonal sense, which is, I think, ultimately what a lot of this stuff really is, if we're frank, I'd prefer to be around people who have sort of like certain principles that they're uncompromising about. People who do have loyalties to other people that extend beyond like, advancing themselves or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you hate the libs, then I fuck with you. I think that's my basic criteria. Like, just hate the libs, hate the elite, and I fuck with you. My tent's pretty big. We'll hash out the rest of the details later, the disagreements later. Like, that's my baseline. I need that first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
There's
a lot of people that meet that criteria. A lot of people that meet that criteria.
That's how like all of my childhood friends are, because like I was raised in Alabama, and like so like their more conservative reactionary kind of politics has a stronger base, and so like going back home this time around, I was able to be like, yo, no, I fuck with y'all on that shit for different reasons, but I fuck with you on that shit, and like let me talk to you about why, and like it's tight because it's like being able to realize that like you can bridge through shit, and like people who have this like maybe there's reactionary politics on the left and on the fucking right, and they're both stemmed from usually the same like whatever it is that's causing it causes this flip off that spins off in two different directions, right? And so what you can do is a bunch of times find that like, hey, even though what your politics is maybe like ineffectual in the long run, you're reacting to a real stimulus, a real material fucking issue, and so there's something there, and there's something that we can get to and that we can like figure out there together, even if it is like something where we're coming like at the first point from two different spaces. Yeah,
at least I can talk to you. At least you and I both hate these fucking lockdowns. We hate this stupid lib shit. At least there's that common ground.
Yeah.
Like with the rest of these people, you can't even begin on that. There's no even common footing there. What are we supposed to talk about? Like, if I say that, then I'm a Nazi. So what are we supposed to talk about? There's nothing to talk about.
Like, I was able to pill my parents, who are like very like conservative Christians. They're not conservative in like we vote conservative, but conservative as far as like family values and that kind of shit. I was able to kind of pill them on like economic populism when I was back home, because I was like, hey, I know you guys are worried about like these cultural issues and like the desecration of the family and how like the nuclear family units being like eroded away. And like, I also think that those are issues. And I like, here's the thing is that you think that maybe if everyone was Christian or something, that would fix that. I think that we need to change people's material circumstances. And like, I'm able to have a conversation there where it's like, instead of being like, oh, you're evil because like you think that like fucking abolition of the family is an issue. No, it is an issue. It just maybe the motivations are a little bit different there. But like, what you can do is get down to the root base of why is this happening? Like, capitalism is eroding the family base because people don't have the proper like societal goods and services and the time to be able to raise good, healthy families and communities that are strong and important and value that type of thing. So like, it's an issue of like, we need to be able to try to incentivize and build strong communities like that through altering their material reality. And it's like, you can get to those very simple statements to people that it's almost impossible to disagree with. Like, if you really get down to that base level, it's like, how the fuck can you disagree with that? And it's in like, if you don't ever give people the second chance or the time to listen to what their concerns are about, if you just balk away and you're scared of what the substance of their critique is, then you're never going to get to those places to have those constructive moments. Yeah. Like with SLAV, like, I don't have any sentiments about the family structure or community or tradition. I don't have any feelings about any of that shit. I don't really care. But I do know that they're eroding it, and I know why. I know what function it serves. I know what they get out of it, like power consolidation wise, wealth consolidation wise. Like, I see that. So we have a similar complaint or like a similar issue. So I get why he finds that troubling and other people find that troubling. I don't find it troubling for the same reason. Yeah, exactly.
But again, exactly. There's plenty of common ground.